In this video, we're going to talk about monitors. But in order to talk about that, we first need to talk about some more fundamental concepts. In the first video I did, I told you how this is a fader, and this whole thing is a fader strip. Now there's actually a more fundamental layer here. A fader can be assigned to either a channel or a bus. A channel is basically anything that's an input. So any of your instruments, any of your microphones, these will all be connected to a channel. A bus is anything that's an output. So all of your monitors are buses, your effects are technically buses, and even your main LR over here is actually called the main LR bus. When you adjust this fader, you're not actually controlling the volume of the channel. What you're controlling is the send from this channel to the main LR bus. So every channel has a main LR send and also has 16 other sends, one for each of your buses. So for one of our gray blocks here, there's actually a Mix Bus Sends button, which takes us to this Sends tab on the screen. To quickly walk through this screen, it gives us control of each of our buses from 1 to 16. Since we don't have 16 dials down here, this little square gives us control of 4 at a time, and we can move it with this far right slider or click it to advance through 4. When you're selected, these give you dial control over that exact bus send, and a click mutes it. And when you adjust one of these faders, you're turning up the amount of signal that sends from the piano to bus 1, 2, 3, or so on. Now you may have noticed there's some parts of the interface here that I haven't explained yet. That's because each send actually comes from what's called a tap. So each channel is tapped at a certain point to adjust what sends. In one of my earlier videos, I described what I called the flow of signal. What happens when the signal comes through the board and how it goes through each of these gray blocks. Along the bottom, you can actually see a little chart showing the exact flow of signal for this channel. There's little icons representing each thing, so you can see the gain, the gate, compressor, equalizer, and even the fader at the bottom. And throughout the chart, there's different tap points. In LC, pre-EQ, post-EQ, pre- and post-fader. As you can see, most of these channels are set to post-EQ. That's because I don't want the fader volume to affect the send, but I do want the EQ, the gate, and the gain all to apply before we send to that monitor. These buses on the right are set to post-fader. That's because those buses are set up with effects. For example, 16 is our band reverb. The reverb is set to post-fader because if it was set to pre-fader, then adjusting the volume of the channel wouldn't affect the reverb. And you could potentially end up in a situation where the reverb of the piano would actually be louder than the sound the piano's originally making. By setting this to post-fader, the volume set on the channel affects the volume passed through to the bus, thereby reducing the reverb when we turn down the piano, and vice versa. However, this isn't an effect we want on our instruments. There's a moment where you need to turn the piano down. You still want your piano player to be able to hear himself clearly. Thus, each of the sends to our band's monitors are post-EQ, and each of the sends to our effects are post-fader. And each of the other tap points have different specialized uses. And with that, you know how to use the Sends tab. Now the Sends tab is extremely powerful and gives you the most precise control over your sends. But it's incredibly slow in practice. And that's why we have this magic little button right here the Sends on Fader button. Now the Sends on Fader button does exactly what it says. It allows you to adjust the sends on a fader. And that has a different meaning depending on whether the fader is a channel or a bus. I've pulled up the first 8 channels here on the left and the first 8 buses here on the right to make this easier to follow. Normally, each of the faders on a bus controls the master volume of that bus. If I take the back monitor and turn it up, the back monitor will be louder, regardless of what channel is coming into it. But if I select our piano and click Sends on Fader, the meaning of this fader changes. Now, instead of adjusting the master volume of the bus, this changes the volume of the send of channel 1 to bus 1. And that shows up on the screen crystal clear for you to read. So if I grab this fader now, what I'm doing is turning up just channel 1, the piano, in bus 1, the back monitor. So if someone asks for more piano in the back monitor, this is what we can do. This is really great for setting up a new channel. So if you plug in a new mic or a new guitar and need to adjust that send in everyone's ears to make sure they can hear it, simply click Select, Sends on Fader, and now you're adjusting the send of that channel to every single bus. And you can see who can hear it and who can't. Now, let's look at what the Sends on Fader button does for a bus. Normally, a channel fader adjusts the send of that channel to the main LR bus, the house. But when we select bus 1 and click Sends on Fader, each of these faders now adjusts to change the send from that channel to the selected bus. So now we can see the entire mix of instruments going into the back monitor. This can be really great for making a lot of adjustments to a bus. So, for example, if last week your backup in your monitor was given to a vocalist, and this week it's being given to a guitarist, you could select that bus, select Sends on Fader, and adjust the full mix for that one monitor. So, our guitarist this week is going to need a lot more bass, and is probably going to need to be able to hear themselves. Super simple stuff. And with that, you know enough about faders, channels, buses, and sends to really understand what's going on when you adjust a monitor and how to make those changes on the fly.